I didn't think a quiet house by the lake could hold so much noise until the silence started sounding like a warning. It began with a sentence so casual, so harmless, I almost missed the weight of it. "Mom, we were thinking, maybe it's time for a little change." If I had known what that change would cost me, I would have listened more carefully. I would have watched his eyes instead of hers. But I didn't, and that was my first mistake. I've always believed that love, when given freely, builds something unbreakable. Maybe that belief came from raising my daughter alone. Maybe it came from the years I spent turning a small, quiet property into the only place that ever truly felt like home. The lake house wasn't just a house. It was memory. Every wooden panel, every window facing the water, every creak in the hallway, I knew them like I knew my own heartbeat. My daughter learned to walk on those floors. She cried on that porch when she lost her first friend. We healed there. We grew there. So when she brought him into our lives, I didn't hesitate. Daniel, soft-spoken, polite, the kind of man who never interrupted, who always offered to help, who called me Mom before the wedding even happened. At first, I thought maybe life was finally giving something back. He earned my trust slowly, carefully, fixing small things around the house without being asked, bringing groceries when I hadn't even realized I needed them, sitting with me on the porch, asking about stories from before he was part of the picture. He listened. And people who listen well, they're dangerous in ways you don't expect. Because you open up, you let them in. After they got married, I offered them the guest wing of the lake house. It wasn't even a question. Stay as long as you need, I told them. And I meant it. Those first few months felt warm, full. The house didn't feel empty anymore. There was laughter again. The kitchen lights stayed on late into the night. Sometimes I would wake up and hear them talking softly, and I'd smile to myself thinking, this is what family sounds like. Daniel was still the same, or so I believed, attentive, helpful, respectful. But looking back now, I can see the small shifts. The way he started making decisions before asking. The way he'd say things like, "It might be better if," instead of "What do you think?" At first it was harmless. Rearranging furniture, changing where things were kept, suggesting updates to the house. "You've done so much already, Mom," he'd say. "Let me take care of things now." It sounded like love. It felt like care. But something about it lingered, like a note in a song that didn't quite belong. My daughter, Emily, she didn't notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to. She had always been the kind to see the best in people, even when it wasn't there. "Daniel just wants us to have a better life," she told me once, when I mentioned how quickly things were changing, and I nodded, because I wanted to believe that too. The lake house became different, not in a loud, obvious way. Nothing you could point at and say, "This is wrong," just different. Daniel started spending more time managing things, handling bills, talking about long-term plans. "We should think about the future," he said one evening, standing by the window, looking out at the lake like he owned the reflection in it. I remember watching him from the kitchen, something in his posture, in the way he spoke, confident, but not warm. That's when I felt it for the first time. Not fear, not yet, just unease. It was a week later when the conversation happened. The one that changed everything. We were sitting at the dining table. The same table where Emily used to do her homework as a child. The same table where birthdays were celebrated, where laughter once felt easy. Dinner was quiet that night. Too quiet. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom," he said carefully, "we've been talking about something." I looked at Emily. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was the second thing I should have noticed. "We think it might be a good idea," he continued. "If my parents moved in for a while," the words hung in the air like something fragile. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't understand, but because I was trying to. "My parents aren't doing well on their own," he added. "They need support. And this house, it has space." It makes sense. Makes sense. Such a simple phrase. So easy to say when it's not your memories being rearranged. I looked at Emily again. She nodded gently. "Just for a while, Mom. Just for a while." Another phrase that sounds smaller than it is. I wish I could say I immediately refused. I wish I could say I stood up, set a boundary, protected what was mine. But I didn't, because this was my daughter. Because this was the man she chose. Because I believed that family meant making room, even when it hurt. "Of course," I said. And the moment I said it, something inside me shifted. Not broken, not yet, just moved, like a door quietly closing somewhere deep inside the house. The next few days passed quickly. Too quickly. Daniel took control of the arrangements almost immediately. Phone calls, schedules, plans. It was like he had been waiting for me to say yes. That thought stayed with me. Uncomfortable, unanswered. Then came the cameras. At first, it was presented as a safety measure. Just for peace of mind, Daniel explained. With more people in the house, it's better to be cautious. Security cameras. Inside. Not everywhere, but enough. Living room. Hallway. Entrance. I hesitated. You think that's necessary? I asked. He smiled. Nothing to worry about. It's just precaution. Precaution. Another harmless word. Another thing I let pass. The house began to feel watched, not in a threatening way. Not at first. Just aware, like the walls had started paying attention. Emily didn't seem bothered. She adjusted easily. Too easily. And I told myself that maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just not used to change. Maybe this was what growing families looked like. Maybe this was normal. But late at night, when the house was quiet again, I would sit by the lake and think about the way Daniel spoke now, about how decisions seemed to move around me instead of through me, about how my own home felt slightly out of reach. And every time I pushed the thought away, because doubt feels like betrayal when it's about people you love. The day his parents arrived, the air felt heavier. I remember standing at the doorway watching their car pull in. Daniel stood beside me, calm, confident, prepared, like everything was exactly as it should be. And as I turned slightly, my eyes caught something. One of the cameras, mounted quietly in the corner of the living room, its small red light blinking, steady, unblinking, watching. That's when a thought crossed my mind for the first time. Not loud, not clear, but sharp enough to stay. What if this wasn't about helping his parents? What if this was about something else entirely? I didn't say anything. Not yet. But as Daniel stepped forward to greet them, I noticed the way he glanced, just for a second, toward the camera, and smiled. That was the moment I realized I might not be the one in control of this house anymore, and whatever was coming next had already been planned. The first night after they arrived, I didn't sleep. It wasn't because of noise. There wasn't any. That was the problem. A house with 5 people in it should breathe differently. There should be footsteps, doors closing, voices echoing faintly through the walls. But that night, everything felt controlled, measured, like even the silence had permission. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment Daniel glanced at the camera. That smile. It wasn't warm. It wasn't proud. It was satisfied. Morning came slowly. I found his parents already settled in as if they had always belonged there. Their bags neatly arranged, their routines already shaping the rhythm of the house. His mother barely looked at me when I greeted her. His father nodded politely, but his eyes moved past me, scanning the room like he was memorizing it, like he was assessing something. By afternoon, I realized something else. The house had changed overnight. Not physically, not in ways anyone could point out, but in ownership. Daniel spoke differently now. He didn't ask where things were. He told people where things were. He didn't check with me about meals. He instructed Emily. Small things, tiny shifts, but together, they built something heavy. I tried to ignore it. I really did. Until the first moment the cameras stopped feeling like precaution and started feeling like proof. It happened 2 days later. I walked into the living room and found Daniel adjusting one of the cameras. He didn't notice me at first. He was focused, precise, scrolling through something on his phone. I stood there quietly, watching him watch the house. Then I heard it. A voice. My voice. Soft, faint, coming from his phone. I'm just not sure this is a good idea. It was from the night at the dining table. The conversation. The one I thought had stayed between us. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened as my own hesitation played back through a device I didn't even know was recording more than video. Daniel paused the clip, replayed it, then zoomed in slightly, adjusting the angle. Not for security, for clarity, for focus. Interesting, isn't it? His voice cut through the room. calm. He hadn't turned around yet, but he knew I was there. I forced myself to speak. You recorded that? He turned then, slowly, like there was no reason to rush. It's just the system, he said. It keeps everything. Everything. The word landed heavier than it should have. That was a private conversation, I said. For you, he replied. But this is a shared home now. Shared. Another word that sounded harmless. Another word that didn't feel that way anymore. I didn't argue. Not then. Because something in his tone told me this wasn't a discussion. It was a position. That night, I couldn't sit still. Every room felt like it had ears. Every moment felt documented. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into the storage room. There are things we keep not because we need them, but because they hold pieces of who we were. Old boxes, faded photographs, and in the far corner, a small locked cabinet. Inside, it was something Daniel didn't know about. Something no one did. Not because it was secret, but because no one had ever needed to ask. The original security system, installed years ago, long before Daniel. Back when I lived alone and the world felt a little less predictable. Back when I believed in being careful. Quietly, it wasn't advanced. Not flashy, but it had one thing his system didn't: independence. I spent hours that night reconnecting it, slowly, carefully. Hands shaking more from realization than fear. I wasn't trying to fight him. I just needed to see, to understand, to confirm what my instincts had been whispering. By morning, I had access again, not to his cameras, but to something better: perspective. The first thing I noticed wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. Patterns, conversations that only happened in certain rooms, movements that avoided certain angles, moments where Daniel would lower his voice, only when standing outside the camera's reach. Then I found it. A clip! Late at night. The living room empty, at least that's what his system would have shown. But from my angle, there he was. Daniel, standing just out of frame of his own camera. Talking. It's already working, he said quietly. A pause. Then his mother's voice. And the house? Daniel exhaled softly. She's hesitant. But it doesn't matter. The recordings are enough. My chest tightened. Recordings? Enough for what? His father spoke next. And ownership? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Then, once everything is clear, it'll be easier. She won't fight it. If she thinks she's already agreed to everything, I stopped the clip. Not because I didn't want to hear more, but because I already understood enough. This wasn't about helping his parents. This wasn't about space. This wasn't even about family. This was about control. About slowly reshaping reality until I didn't recognize it anymore. Until my own words could be used against me. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling something settle inside me. Not fear, not anger, something quieter, stronger, clarity. That afternoon, Daniel approached me again. Same calm expression, same careful tone. We should talk, he said. I nodded. About what? About making things official, he replied. Just to avoid confusion later. Of course. We sat at the same dining table, same chairs, same view of the lake, but nothing felt the same. You've always wanted what's best for Emily, he began. I said nothing. You've built something beautiful here, he continued, and it should stay in the family. Stay, another gentle word, another heavy meaning. He slid a folder across the table. Documents, neatly arranged. Prepared. I've outlined a simple agreement, he said. Just something that reflects the current living situation. Shared responsibility. Shared ownership. Eventually, I looked at the papers. Then at him. Then at Emily. She wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't just him. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to stay quiet. Enough to let it happen. My heart didn't break. Not in that moment. It just adjusted. Like something inside me quietly realigned. I placed my hand on the folder. Gently, calmly. And for the first time since this began, I smiled. Of course, I said softly. Daniel relaxed almost instantly. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the first time since he stepped into my home, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was ready. Because the house was still mine. The memories were still mine. And now, so was the truth. And this time, I was going to let the camera speak.